Now, for today's business matters, a 14-year class action case is wrapping up with Google forking over $100 million. The Alphabet-owned company was accused of overcharging advertisers, and this dates back to 2011 when advertisers who used Google's ads filed a lawsuit. They accused the search engine operator of manipulating its formula to artificially reduce discounts. Advertisers said Google also misled them by failing to limit ads to locations they're designed, or designated rather. Part of the reason the case went so long is the sheer amount of evidence. This included nearly 1 million pages of documents. Google denied any wrongdoing in agreeing to settle. A slim down for Lululemon Athletica. The sportswear maker has shared downbeat annual forecasts. The company flagged a drop in consumer spending over increased concerns about inflation and the economy. This is on top of growing competition in the athletic wear industry. Lululemon has been losing market share to rivals like Alo Yoga and Viore. During a post-earnings call, CEO Calvin McDonald said the company launched several new products this year, but has seen a more cautious consumer. At least 12 analysts trimmed their price targets on Lululemon's shares. A convicted founder has been pardoned by President Trump. Trevor Milton founded electric and hydrogen-powered truck maker Nikola, which filed for bankruptcy protection last month. In 2022, Milton was convicted of fraud. Prosecutors say he misled investors. For example, they say he boasted about the early success of creating its Nikola 1 semi-truck that he knew did not work. And they say Nikola claimed to have developed its own batteries when Milton knew they were being bought. On Instagram, Milton posted that President Trump called him personally to tell him he was issued a full and unconditional pardon. From rare to well done, how do Americans like their steaks cooked lately? While not at Outback, the Aussie-themed steaks are losing favor to Texas Roadhouse and Longhorn. Sales for both topped Outbacks last year. Inflation pressure is pushing diners toward chains they see as a better deal. Outback had hiked prices, and customers and analysts said the food quality and service suffered. In fact, Outback's average check was $29 last year, about $6 more than Roadhouse and $2.50 more than Longhorn. Roadhouse and Longhorn both rank at the top of the American Customer Satisfaction Index. U.S. airlines were flying high less than 2 months ago as strong travel demand and tight industry-wide capacity raised the prospect of a multi-year profit boom. But things seem different now. Here's more.
Hopes of a new golden age for U.S. airlines are fading as worries continue to grow over the impact of President Donald Trump's tariffs on the economy. Major airlines including Delta, United, and American Airlines, which were flying high less than 2 months ago on strong travel demand, have since cut their first quarter profit forecasts. Rising economic uncertainty has forced tourists and companies to reduce spending. And with demand slowing, airlines have started scaling back the number of flights to avoid lowering fares and to protect margins. As a result, the S&P 500 Passenger Airlines Index is down about 15% this year and widely underperforming the broader S&P 500 index. Shares of Delta and United Airlines have each fallen about 20% this year. Some of the demand slowdown is due to recent safety incidents, but carriers expect the lag from safety issues to fade soon. They are less sure, however, about when economic pressures will subside.
And China's top airlines have posted losses for a 5th straight year. The 3 big state-owned airlines are Air China, Air Eastern, and China Southern. The trio are struggling to break even again after the pandemic, even though the global industry returned to profits 2 years ago. The airlines pointed to several challenges, including low demand for international and business travel and a weakened yuan, the Chinese currency. The airlines were able to narrow their annual losses, though. During the peak in 2022, the average loss was $5 billion per airline. Last year, the average was $286 million each. Competition in the semiconductor space is serious. So serious that China's largest chip maker is accused of creating a shell company to lure tech workers from Taiwan. Taiwan's Justice Ministry says SMIC set up a Samoa-based subsidiary to illegally poach engineers. Few details were released except that the company operated next to Taiwan's main semiconductor hub. That's where the world's largest contract chip maker, TSMC, is headquartered. Given Taiwan's dominance in making advanced semiconductors, it has stepped up efforts to stop Chinese firms from stealing know-how and talent. President Donald Trump says his new 25% auto tariffs will bring manufacturing back to the U.S. Let's see how other countries are responding so far.
Nothing is off the table to defend our workers and our country.
Some U.S. trade partners say they plan to retaliate if President Donald Trump follows through with new auto tariffs. 25% duties on vehicles assembled outside the U.S. are set to start April 3rd. Tariffs on imported parts are scheduled to begin by May 3rd. Right now, the North American auto industry is effectively a collaboration between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. If that changes, Canada's Prime Minister says his country will respond forcefully.
We will fight the U.S. tariffs with retaliatory trade actions of our own that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impacts here in Canada.
He also says Canada is looking for new trade partners.
It's going to disadvantage our car industry, and it could eventually cause even more pain in terms of job loss in the long run.
The Mexican president says she'll wait until next week to respond. Germany's economy minister says, quote, "We will not back down." And Japan's prime minister says all options are on the table regarding the tariffs.
It's a lose-lose, and that's also frustrating.
Most economists say Trump's tariffs themselves will raise U.S. car prices. His administration downplays that.
The 25% tariff is going to be absorbed in a lot of different ways, and we're going to race to get more production here. And on net, consumers are going to be better off.
Now, it's worth noting, the EU Commission says it's going to wait until next week to decide on a response, but France's president says Europe will reciprocate. Also, President Trump mentioned that he had a good call with the Canadian Prime Minister today, but did not mention a lessening of tariffs. Meanwhile, at an auto parts store in Atlanta, owner Ernie Simmons is among those in the industry unfazed by President Trump's upcoming 25% tariffs on cars and autos. Simmons says he hopes the tariffs will push other countries to implement fair trade practices. Here's the story.
Ernie Simmons owns an Atlanta store selling auto parts, one of the targets of President Donald Trump's latest tariff plans. His business, Aftermarket Auto Parts, relies heavily on imports from Taiwan. But Simmons says he's not worried.
As far as the tariffs go, I really don't have a problem with them. And the reason is, number one, I think that they're going to be temporary, because all that Trump is trying to do is make things equal. Whatever they charge us, we're going to charge them.
90% of Aftermarket's inventory is from Taiwan, according to Simmons, but he's optimistic that the tariffs will lead to a wider change.
I think there's going to be some pressure on us for a little while, but I also believe that these countries will come to the realization that they're not going to get a free ride anymore, and they're going to have to treat us when we export something to them the same way that we treat them when they import to us.
On Wednesday, Trump announced he'd make good on threats of new tariffs aimed at cars. He's planning a 25% import tax on vehicles not built in the U.S. to kick in next week. Then, duties on parts will roll out by May 3rd. Engines, transmissions, and electrical components are all identified as targets in a Trump proclamation. Vehicles and parts made in the U.S. will be exempt. While Simmons is brushing off the impact he'll feel, some experts say these tariffs could shake up the whole industry. Tibor Besedes, a professor of economics at Georgia Tech, says they create uncertainty across the supply chain.
Will there be a different administration 4 years down the road? They might do away with them, in which case they have to evaluate whether it makes sense to build a factory in the United States and then bring it online, and that might take anywhere up to 2 years, and then what happens if tariffs go away?
The tariffs, jumping from a current 2.5% to 25% rate on imported cars, take effect a minute after midnight on April 3rd on the U.S. East Coast.
And Kia plans to produce hybrid vehicles at its affiliate Hyundai Motors' new U.S. factory starting in mid-2026. The plan comes as the South Korean automaker works to meet growing demand. Hyundai broke ground for an all-electric car factory in Georgia in 2022 under former President Biden's administration. But in a shift in strategy, Hyundai now plans to add hybrid cars to the factory's production lines. During an opening ceremony this week, Kia CEO said its vehicles will represent 40% of the Georgia plant's total production. Hyundai said it plans to expand the factory's annual production capacity to 500,000 vehicles from an originally planned 300,000. That would bring Hyundai and Kia's combined total U.S. production capacity to 1.2 million vehicles per year. Fashion giant H&M is planning to create digital clones of its human models, raising more questions about AI's potential and its impact on workers. The company plans to create 3D digital twins of its models this year, though it is still exploring how they will be used. It says it's working with others in the industry to do it in a responsible way. According to H&M, the models would own the rights to their digital twin and be paid for AI campaigns. The company's plan was met with pushback from some in the industry. One model-turned-labor activist voiced serious concerns about the use of AI models without meaningful protections in place. The NBA and International Basketball Federation are exploring a potential new basketball league in Europe. The two organizations announced the possible joint venture at a press conference in New York following yesterday's meeting of the NBA Board of Governors. NTD Sean Marshall has more.
The EuroLeague, Europe's professional basketball league, is ready to enter talks with the National Basketball Association after the NBA announced it was exploring the possibility of launching a new pro basketball league on the continent.
Initial thought is that we would have a 16-team league potentially, and this is still very preliminary, maybe 12 permanent clubs and 4 clubs that would be in a position to play in on a yearly basis.
There have been other NBA ventures outside of North America that have run into politically charged issues like free speech and human rights. The NBA is returning to China next season after more than 5 years, after the league was effectively banned over Commissioner Adam Silver not punishing Daryl Morey for tweeting, "Stand with Hong Kong," in support of pro-freedom demonstrators in the region. The NBA announced last December that it struck a deal to play preseason games involving the Brooklyn Nets and the Phoenix Suns in China's gambling hub of Macau.
One, we want to better test the level of interest of existing clubs. In some cases, what comes with those existing clubs are huge global brands. In some cases, those brands built through global soccer, not basketball, but we recognize there's a tremendous depth of interest in people rooting for those clubs, so that becomes very relevant as well.
Well, NBA salaries are much higher than those in European basketball leagues. Top EuroLeague players can earn over $2 million annually.
It's early days, so literally nothing has been agreed upon yet. We're still in the modeling and I would say exploratory stage. One thing, though, we know is important is we want to honor the traditions of European basketball.
Silver said any league that would require a vote of the NBA board to move forward would honor the current international and European format, including 40-minute games as opposed to the 48-minute format used in the NBA. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
And it looks like the sun is setting on the Sundance Film Festival's time in Park City, Utah. After being in that location for more than 40 years, the annual event will move to Boulder, Colorado in 2027. Last April, the Sundance Institute announced it was looking for a new host city for the festival, and Boulder beat out the other 5 finalists. Institute officials said they assessed various factors, including city infrastructure and event capabilities, before making their selection. Colorado Governor Jared Polis said he is thrilled with the decision to pick Boulder. Making it in Hollywood appears harder than ever. A report from the Otis College of Art and Design found entertainment jobs are still 25% below their peak in 2022. To make matters worse, this appears to be a new normal. That means Hollywood might never recover from the writers and actors strikes of 2023. Other Hollywood troubles include the pandemic, the end of peak streaming, and production moving away from California. A theatrical stage worker union official said roughly 18,000 full-time TV and film production jobs vanished between 2022 and 2024. The report did find that the entertainment industry added about 15,000 new jobs last year, but that's still below the jobs lost during the strikes. She was America's Golden Girl, and now Betty White is getting a forever tribute. Thursday, the U.S. Postal Service unveiled the Betty White Forever stamp during a ceremony at the Los Angeles Zoo and Botanical Gardens. The stamp features the beloved actress, comedian, and animal rights activist with her warm smile and iconic blonde curls. She's wearing a polka dot top and a paw print earring to symbolize her love for animals. You can buy the collectible stamps on the USPS website at a post office as well, locations nationwide. White's career spanned over 6 decades. She was best known for starring in the Mary Taylor Moore Show, The Golden Girls, and Hot in Cleveland. She died in 2021, just weeks before her 100th birthday. The Senate has scrapped a rule from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that would have capped bank overdraft fees. The regulation was finalized under former President Biden. In a 52-48 vote this week, lawmakers overturned the rule. If it had gone into effect, overdraft charges would have been limited to $5 for financial institutions with more than $10 billion in assets. All but one Republican supported the joint resolution rescinding the rule. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley was the only GOP lawmaker not on board with the move. And the U.S. economy remained relatively solid in February, according to the latest information from the Commerce Department. Consumer spending rose by 0.4% in February. The data also shows the personal consumption expenditures price index increased 2.5% from a month ago compared to a year ago. However, some economists are warning things could change in the near future. And also, according to another survey, Americans are more worried about rising unemployment than they've been in over 15 years. The University of Michigan released its latest survey today. It found consumer sentiment tanked 12% this month. Respondents blamed economic uncertainty for their concerns. The survey's director said 2/3 of consumers expect unemployment to rise in the year ahead, the highest reading since 2009. Those worries come on top of increasing fears of high inflation. Meanwhile, the state of Utah took a major step last week toward the use of gold and silver as transactional currencies, allowing their use for state payments to vendors. A bill sponsored by State Representative Ken Ivory passed the Utah State Legislature on March 18th and is now awaiting the signature of Governor Spencer Cox. Earlier, I spoke to former Wall Street banker Kevin Stocklin, who is now a reporter with Epoch Times on this subject. So how do you view the potential impact of these laws, on the stability of the U.S. dollar?
There are actually a number of states. Utah is the first to allow it for state payments, but all in all, there are 25 states that are looking at passing this sort of legislation to allow gold or silver to be a currency in their state. Whether this replaces the dollar, is highly speculative. I think people think that that's unlikely. But what it does do is it offers an alternative to people who want to save in an alternative currency and now even to transact in an alternative currency.
Is it possible that in the future it could be a form of maybe not to replace the dollar, but maybe as a supplementary option?
Absolutely. Well, there's a new company called Glint. They're based out of the UK. And what they do, they're a bank of sorts. You place gold with them. It's held in a vault in Switzerland. And they issue a MasterCard debit card that you are able to use to make payments in any currency you want. You can use it just like any credit card or debit card all around the world. So this is a very viable solution to the payments. We don't have, that I'm aware of, major companies doing this in the U.S., but it's an invitation to a lot of fintech companies to move in this direction, particularly if we see a lot of states passing laws to allow gold as a currency.
So if gold and silver becomes a potential supplementary option in addition to the dollar, how do you see perhaps this trend affecting global confidence or how the international countries view the U.S. dollar?
Well, it would certainly be an issue for that. It depends on how widespread it is. But I think people see it kind of as the reverse, as they look at monetary policy, the trillions of dollars of new spending that happened under the Biden administration and the Trump administration as well, and all of the money that was put in circulation by the Fed during the COVID crisis. They look at that and they say, well, you know, the government seems to actively be deflating our dollar, which is really a form of taxation. So this is potentially an alternative that people are looking at to really hold on to the value of their savings and their earnings.
Okay, well, it's a very interesting topic, but let me just ask you perhaps one more thing. So how could this movement affect the role of digital currencies, right, like Bitcoin or central bank digital currencies?
Sure. Well, it would definitely be a competitor. Bitcoin is interesting because it was originally designed to play this role of a transactional currency, and it never really became that. It's become more of a commodity that people speculate on, but it has not become something that people use in any widespread fashion to shop or buy or transact. So if this technology actually takes hold, such as Glint, using debit cards to access and spend your gold money that's sitting in a vault, then the gold actually could become a transactional currency in a way that Bitcoin and crypto never has.
Well, very interesting discussion, Kevin. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Don. Thank you.
Okay, on to markets. Wall Street stocks ended sharply lower today. So that's with sell-offs in Amazon, Microsoft, and as well other technology heavyweights. So after U.S. data stoked fears of potentially weak economic growth and high inflation, that is, U.S. consumer spending rebounded less than expected in February, while a measure of underlying prices increased the most in 13 months. And adding to potential concerns here, I mentioned earlier of the University of Michigan survey showing consumers' 12-month inflation expectations. That soared to the highest in nearly 2.5 years in March, and that consumers expect inflation to remain elevated beyond the next year. So inflation and tariff worries sent shares of Wall Street's most valuable companies sharply lower. That's with Apple, Microsoft, Amazon all losing ground. All right, and that's it for today's Business Matters.